Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. My name is Aaron. I am here with Ryan Nelson, my cohort here with the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning in this lovely day, wherever you're getting your podcast, checking us out. Ryan, what's new with you, dude? How are things?
Yeah, not too much new is new. I'm doing really well. How about yourself?
Hey, not too bad. Living the dream over here, some might say. Yeah. But tonight we're gonna jump into our topic for today. We're going to talk about this is a fun, I almost thought about doing this one as a personal question. I don't know if we've kind of covered it similarly like this before, but I was hanging out on social media the other day, and I was watching this thing that talked about would you choose $50,000 or would you rather have $1 million right now or $50,000 for the rest of for every year for the rest of your life? And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Like that could be a fun topic to talk about here because I always love fantasizing if I get money, about that. So I'm curious to hear your breakdown on this about what's the right answer. I suppose the spreadsheet answer, maybe
sure.
The real life answer will overlap those and such too. So I'll go ahead and pause there and let me know your thoughts on this here.
Yeah. So so make sure I understand it correctly. Sure. You're either getting $1 million today, or $50,000 a year every year for the rest of your life.
Exactly. Yes,
okay.
That's the case. Also, a little caveat there: the money is tax free too, so that just comes into your bank account naturally. Because
nice,
it is a nice piece of it. I always like to throw that in there whenever anybody says oh, what would you do if you had you got $6 million? I was like, is this before or after taxes? Because that makes a big difference.
Sure.
When it comes to that, because that's going to put me. Yeah. My buckets, if you ever listen to our episodes on how the progressive tax system work, it's going to fill up a few more buckets with that there. So, anyway.
Yeah, and so that is interesting. It kind of changes that dynamic a little bit, it being tax-free, honestly. If you were to, because it does affect your tax brackets, right?
Right, sure.
If you're getting $50,000 every year for the rest of your life, that's going to put you in higher tax brackets later in life, maybe make things like Roth conversions more challenging. But if you get $1 million now, you're going to be in a really big tax bracket all in 1 year. So there's different pros and cons, right? Mm-hmm. But so we're saying, hey, we get $1 million tax-free or $50,000 a year tax-free. So, like you said, well, first
probably depends on your age too. I'd probably preface that.
Oh,
sorry, you're diving in. Sorry,
sure,
my fault.
That's a big variable. Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll touch on that one here real quick. But if you're 100 years old, do you want $50,000 a year every year for the rest of your life? Even if you live another 5 years, you're only making $250,000.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Whereas if you're 18 years old, you got a lot of years left, right? So kind of my first thought would be to kind of do some quick math. So back in episode 33, we talked about what was called the 4% rule. Do you remember that rule at all?
Nope.
Yep.
That's why I have you.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's all right. You can go back and re-listen to episode 33.
Exactly. I should, actually. I'll listen on the way home. Yeah.
So episode 33 was about the 4% rule. What the 4% rule is if you had $100,000, if somebody had $100,000, how much could they safely take out of their account every year, in theory, without running out of money? It's a general rule of thumb. It's actually a rule of thumb I don't love that much because it's too general, but it's useful in quick contexts like this. So if you had $100,000 saved, in theory, you could spend $4,000 a year out of that every year for the rest of your life. So if we were to apply that logic here and we said, well, what if we were to take the lump sum of $1 million? Mm-hmm. That would kind of tell us, hey, we could take out 4% of that or $40,000 a year every year for the rest of our life and never touch that $1 million principal. Mm-hmm. So that'd be interesting. So if you just took the $40,000 lump sum, in theory, you invest it appropriately, you could take out $40,000 every year for the rest of your life, mm-hmm. or you could get $50,000 every year for the rest of your life, right? Now, again, there's a lot of issues with the 4% rule. Sure. So again, it's a really general rule of thumb. That's why I don't really love it. And, if you go back and listen to that episode, you're actually more likely with the 4% rule that your $1 million, doubles, then goes to zero.
Yeah,
right.
I like that. I like those odds.
Yeah, right. But so that'd be something to pay attention to. But, if we were just to use that as a general rule of thumb to start off with as sort of our first level of analysis, you could make an argument that from just that first level of analysis that getting the $50,000 a year every year for the rest of your life wins out over taking the lump sum and spending $40,000 a year every year for the rest of your life. So that'd be kind of my first thought.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to think about those different things of like, okay, because immediately like it's kind of what I can't remember who said, like there's also an analogy maybe we talked about, like you get like a penny every second or something. Like there's some sort of thing that we've done, like, oh, would you rather take $1 million or a penny every second for like a year? I can't remember what it was, but it was funny to kind of think about, like, you know, you think about, like, if you get the $1 million for myself, I'm automatically like, that could really help me out, like right now, I suppose. Like, but is it? What would I do with that money? I suppose, and that's kind of the thing that everybody will really think about. Like, but how, like you said, how long will you live? Like, what's the thought process on that?
Yep. So I think what you were talking about, I just re-looked this up because I couldn't remember exactly off the top of my head as well. It's like, would you rather have $1 million up front or a penny and have that penny double every day for a month?
That's what it is. A penny double every day for a month.
So it would go from 1 cent the next day, 2 cents to 4 cents to 8 cents to 16 cents. And so it's crazy. It's like, of course, the million, right? But what's so absurd is, you know, it starts growing so small, only 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 cents to 32 cents to 64 cents to $1.20. So you're like a week in, you got like $1, right? And then it's $2, $4, $8. But that's the effects of compounding. And if this is correct, this says the penny growing every day at the end of 30 days, doubling every day at the end of 30 days would be a little over $5 million. So a lot more than the million, right?
Definitely.
So there's this effect of compounding, and that is part of this equation. So if you get the $1 million up front, you can start investing it right away, right?
Right.
So imagine I took the $1 million up front, I started investing it right away, and I don't plan on even touching it until I retire. I give that thing 30 years to double, then quadruple, and then eighttuple or whatever over 30 years. You know, that 1 million might turn into 8 million by the time my retirement comes around 30 years from now, and I could be in a pretty good spot, right? Whereas you could do a similar thing with your 50,000 a year coming in. You could still be investing it, but you'd have less upfront to invest, right?
Right. Yeah, you'd kind of have to wait for that. It's almost like, hey, do you want like that big pile of money to start out with, or do you want that like steady check, I suppose?
Yeah.
Like, which is just an interesting piece of like, I don't know. I think you also think about, like, if somebody wins the lottery, they offer like a lump sum or like the annual payouts or so. I can't remember what it is too. And that's always the debate. Like, what do you do with that?
Exactly.
Like, do you pay the taxes on this? But like, it depends on what you're going to do with that money, I suppose. But I guess it really depends on like guessing how long you're going to live. Like,
that's definitely a big piece of it. So again, that 100-year-old probably doesn't make sense for them to take the $50,000 a year, and the 18-year-old might be more incentivized to take the $50,000 a year, right? So definitely sort of estimating your life. I think this is similar to a question of like an annuity or a pension. And so same thing, if there could be a client listening or a listener listening who has $1 million right now who are considering taking that $1 million and buying an annuity. And if they buy that annuity might kick off $50,000 a year for them. So this could be a real question for somebody right now. Do you want to just keep your $1 million, or do you want to trade your $1 million in for an annuity that's going to pay you $50,000 a year every year for the rest of your life, right? So it may not be as hypothetical as you think for a lot of listeners out there.
Interesting.
And so it really, these kind of lottery-based questions, like they become sort of real-world questions for more people than you think through the lens of like annuities. And the math works out where like this is maybe a semi-reasonable trade-off. And then the reality is like these annuity companies, they've calculated this in such a way where kind of mathematically it's more or less a trade-off if you keep the money up front or you take the monthly payments or the annual payments. And so the reality is I think a lot of times these questions end up, you mentioned it at the top of the recording, but like is there's a spreadsheet answer and there's your answer, right?
Oh yeah.
And a lot of times this comes just down to a value decision. It's like the math comes out to be pretty similar. There's unknowns we don't know. If you live to be 200 years old, we wish we had the monthly payment or the monthly or annual payments.
Right. We
If you pass away next month, we wish we would have taken the lump sum. We just don't have that decision. Like it's impossible for us to have that information on the front end when we make the decision. So the reality is a lot of times I feel like it just comes down to a value decision and like a risk versus reward. And getting the $1 million up front, you're trading off some longevity, but you have all $1 million up front. You have flexibility to spend it now. If you pass away next month or next year or in 2 years, you can pass that money on to your, kids or spouse or whatever. So I feel like honestly, these questions often comes back to like a values-based decision. And when you look at like the spreadsheet answer, it's oftentimes almost a toss-up. Yeah. It's pretty close. Again, assuming you're not 99 or 18. Yeah. Like for most of the time, these style of questions come down to being a very similar like trade-off from a spreadsheet answer. And so it really comes down to your answer, your values. So I'd be curious, like which one would you gravitate towards?
Yeah, immediately I think right off the bat, like I think I would take the $1 million. I think I would. Because like you mentioned, like the compound and just growth over time. I mean, I'm not getting any younger, first off. And I think that if I could get that, I could, pay off some debt or whatever it might be. I also think it'd be nice I feel like with the 50,000, I'd be like waiting every year for that to hit my bank account and be like, okay, cool. We've bought this new car because we know we can do this like 50,000 versus if I was like, take that $1 million and be like, cool. All right. Put a little aside for a fun trip and let's like be smart with this other piece of it and then really make that work for me, I suppose. I just feel like that would probably be the way I would go. But then again, I'm like, if I'm going to live for another 30 years, like, what's the value of like, I guess, 50,000 in 30 years every day? So I don't know. But I would lean towards a lump sum. What about yourself? Like,
I would definitely take the lump sum. I think that and it comes back to like, I think depending on your decisions, right? So you got to take all these variables into account. And then for me, I think the spreadsheet answer for me starts it starts leaning a lot more heavily towards the $1 million. And so that's why I would probably go that way. But so like so imagine I got the $1 million. When we talk about the 4% rule, this is like applying it to like a retiree-ish, right? So somebody who it needs to be investing semi-conservatively has to be cognizant of not running out of money.
Right.
They have to be aware of what are called sequence of return risks. And so they're investing kind of conservatively. So they might be getting 4 or 5% returns. That's why you could spend 4% a year, right? For somebody like myself, let's say I don't need the money tomorrow or the next month or the next year or the next 5 years. I have a career right now. I'm living off of the money I earn from my career. If I take the $1 million, I could afford, I've now bought the ability to be more aggressive with the money. So now I could take that money, invest it more aggressively in line with my now risk tolerance and risk horizon. And so now I might get 7% returns. Well, 7% of $1 million, $70,000 a year.
Yeah.
So I might be compounding at $70,000 a year as opposed to $50,000 a year. So I might start with $1 million and grow at 70,000 a year, as opposed to start with 0 and grow at 50,000 a year.
Yeah.
Right. So the fact that I'm not already in retirement, I have the ability to not spend the money, let it sit and grow. And if the stock market drops 20% and my $1 million drops to 800,000, hey, no harm, no foul. I wasn't taking distributions from it anyways. That ability, so since I'm still working, that ability buys me the flexibility of being more aggressive, which I think in my case would be a no-brainer. I definitely want to take the $1 million. So that'd be my 2 cents for myself.
Yeah. No, I think that's important. I think you hit on a couple of different pieces there. Age, risk tolerance, risk horizon, these different things that honestly, I always think of this would be a great problem to have.
It'd be a fun problem to have.
It would. These are I'm not a huge math guy, but these are my kind of math problems. I'm like, suddenly like my, somebody's asking me to like make change out of a $10 bill, and I'm like, I don't know. But somebody asked me like, oh, what would you do with $1 million? And like the wheels start cooking in there. I'm like, well, I'd take 30,000 here. That would leave me with 970,000. And I'm like, wow, I just become like a real, I don't know, a famous mathematicion's name.
That's funny.
Archimedes or something. I don't know if he was a mathematician, but
we'll go with that.
Yeah. But awesome, Ryan. Well, I appreciate it, man. I like to throw in a fun little palate cleanser here. We do talk about some, I don't want to call it boring stuff because I never find this stuff. Well, it's funny. I do find some of this stuff just everyday life. If somebody was to come up and start a conversation with me and like ask me, like what's my like 401k balance or these certain things, I'd probably be like, okay, sure, yeah, I can. He's like, what are you invested in? I'm like, I'm fine having that conversation, but I love having these conversations with like when somebody's like can break it down and like for me. And I think that that's what's important. Like hopefully what this podcast does for people too, is it like makes it a little bit more fun versus I don't want to say it wettens up the dry stuff, like if you will, a little bit too. So I do think we do cover some of those topics that hopefully we keep fun and stuff. But this was a pretty relatable one for our listeners out there that hopefully everybody's now, the wheels are turning when it comes to those.
For sure.
Everybody wants that $1 million or $50,000.
Yeah.
Hard to say. So
Hey.
we'll see whatever your preference is. But awesome, Ryan. Well, we'll go ahead and take a quick pause here. We'll be back on the other side of this. Everybody hang tight.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back to this side of the Fiscal Physical podcast. I'm still here with Mr. Ryan Nelson. And Ryan, I got a question here that actually feeds into the conversation we were just talking about, the $1 million or $50,000 for a year. So hopefully everybody stuck around for this piece of it here. So my question to you, Ryan, is what's something that you used to think, maybe when you were growing up, that was rich people behavior, or something you saw something you're like, oh, they're rich, kind of piece of it. Like I'm really just interested. I think we probably all have a memory of sorts with that kind of piece of it. But what do you got there?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably lots, I guess, like, like certain like sports or car or like even just like golf. I think pictured like a rich man's game, which probably still is, right, to some degree. But anyways, I would say like even just like going out to eat, not like going out to eat ever, but like, just like going out to eat felt like an experience or something like valuable and not to be taken lightly, I guess. And so that's something that certainly something I grew up picturing. Like, to go to a nice restaurant, you'd have to be like quite wealthy to like be able to go to like a steakhouse or something. Now it's something I find myself doing, which is probably a testament to like my parents and like the fact that I think most parents want to set their children up to be in a better like financial spot than they were. And like the cool thing is like they helped pay for my college and stuff, or they did pay for my undergraduate, right? Nice. And so like it's helped position me and put me in a spot where I can, go out to eat and go to some nice restaurants. And that's something I used to perceive as maybe unattainable. The other thing is like, I still kind of argue this is, but like buying a new car. I'd say this is never a smart decision.
Right.
Do as I say, not as I do. But I bought a 4Runner back in 2018 and it was new from Toyota. And, that is something that, again, is not a smart financial decision. You shouldn't buy a new car. You should buy a used car, financially speaking.
I think we've talked about that a few times.
Like I said, do as I say, not as I do. But anyway, so I bought this car, and that's something that I always thought, like growing up, like buying a new car was like, a rich person thing, and that's just not like what we do. And I did, and it wasn't a smart financial decision. That being said, it's now 8 years old. I still have the same car. It's running great, and it'll probably last me another 20 years. So knock on wood, hopefully it'll end up panning out to work out okay on my behalf. But certainly, I'll say buying a new car seems like maybe rich people behavior that now I guess I did do. So what about yourself?
Yeah, no, you hit right on the car piece of it. Like, we never had my parents bought one new car. And I remember, I was like 6 years old. We bought this big old Ford Aerostar van.
Oh, nice.
Fresh off the lot.
Heck yeah.
Like the green, it's like the green forest green or something like that. Okay. It was kind of an ugly looking vehicle, for being honest, but it got us around. We had 6 people in that car or whatever. And so that thing ran until it had like 320,000 miles on it. It was just crazy. It lasted forever. Like, and, but I remember that feeling of like, oh, we have a new car. Like, that was like something you see in like the movies kind of piece of it. The other one growing up, and this is like it's funny how things kind of change, is you remember those TVs that had like the big like box behind it kind of piece of it?
Like the big screen TVs?
The big screen TVs that were like on this like thick thing, and it took like 6 people to move them. And I remember like if I went to somebody's house and they had one of those, I was like, oh, you must be doing okay.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, like I'm like, oh, like you have like something, you try to like hide, TV screen like blends into the wall kind of piece of it that people,
if it's thinner than paper, you're poor.
Exactly. Yeah, kind of thing.
Or if it's thicker than paper, you're poor.
It's like, oh man, like you see a boxy one of those and you're like, oh wow, did you get that off of finding on the side of the street or something like that? But that used to be one of the things when somebody had like a big screen TV.
Oh yeah,
that was like not even mounted on the wall, just like,
well, they couldn't. It would have torn the house. It would have pulled the house down.
It pulled off the drywall there for sure. But I remember some of my friends growing up had that, and I was like, oh wow, that's wild. Like nowadays, I also think that like the price of TVs is still like very reasonable. Like right now, like I feel like that's one of the things that like really hasn't like skyrocketed. Yeah. So I'm also like, I don't know what the price was back then for something like that, but I mean, just the manpower to get it somewhere. I was like, wow, you must have friends who can help you move this. Too. So you're well off.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So I'm curious to hear the listeners out there what their thought process was growing up. I think as we're younger, we think that things are of a greater magnitude. Sometimes sometimes that they are. So I'm interested to see what you guys think was a rich person behavior, quote unquote, and how your opinion has changed. So awesome, Ryan. Well, thanks so much for the time here, my man. We'll go ahead and wrap this one up, and I will let you have the final say.
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening. And as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode. And consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.